Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where last night the MTV Movie Awards were a major decisive victory for women, which was very interesting because they made a very big deal about going gender neutral for the awards show. Even, I think this is very funny, with the lip sync battle that aired beforehand, having Zendaya and Tom Holland gender swap for their big finales. Zendaya dressed up as Bruno Mars, quite convincingly, I might add. And then Tom Holland wasn't as convincing as Rihanna, but he went for it. And they were rewarded with tremendous chatter on social media. The whole night was a fabulous night for social media. MTV really nailed it in that regard. But one of the reasons that they've had gender-specific acting categories is because of the argument that I believe that women wouldn't be able to compete with men. Like, for instance, it's always very easy to fill the male categories for acting, but every year it's a struggle to find enough women to fill 5 slots, right? So MTV decided to lead the way and make some headlines and shorten their telecast because they did movies and TV this year and had gender-neutral actor categories. So it was just Best Actor in a Movie and Best Actor in a TV Show. And shockingly, women won both categories. Millie Bobby Brown for Stranger Things won Best Actor on Television. That was a less competitive category. But Emma Watson won Best Actor in a Movie, and she beat out Hugh Jackman from Logan. Also James McAvoy from Split. But Hugh Jackman, I think, is the real shocker. There's something to be said for the fact that that just might be reflecting who's on MTV right now these days, right? Like, perhaps Logan fans, just weren't, the whole show wasn't on their radar, and they made a mistake because this is not a great headline. It's fine. And also Hugh Jackman and Daphne Keane won Best Duo, and I think that's great for Daphne Keane. And a number of you, I thought she wasn't particularly charismatic in the role, but a number of you really liked her performance, and I think that the win here, and she was very charming, I think, with her acceptance speech, and when they both struck the Wolverine pose. Child actors can get big pretty fast, and I think so far so good with her. But I think that this win will help her potentially, make Fox feel good about maybe continuing with X-23 and Daphne Keane in that role. But anyway, Emma Watson, it might just, Beauty and the Beast was huge on social media, and Emma Watson is very big on social media, to be fair. So that might be how she was able to win. And Beauty and the Beast won Best Picture. It was a big night for Beauty and the Beast. They had the opening number was all about Beauty and the Beast because they know how the voting is going, so they knew that was going to play it very well to their fans. And that was a big movie on social media. And this is perfect timing for Emma Watson because, of course, The Circle is dying a horrible death at the box office. And so she's able to show that in the right role, which, again, it seems to be quite specific, but when she's in that right role, she does incredibly well. So I think that her management team is like, whoo, let's go use this momentum to negotiate a role for her. Don't be surprised if maybe she gets something in the next week or so, hopefully by the end of this week, to capitalize on this before those Circle numbers circle back. And they're like, oh, but look at those box office numbers. They're so bad. She wants to blind people with her golden popcorn. But the other reason this is a very big win for Emma Watson is that she's taken a lot of hate for her very strong stand for feminism. She's weathered quite the storm. And I think that it's really nice for her that she was able to win this award, the first time that the category went gender neutral for acting at the MTV Movie Awards. That's really nice for her. Not only for what she tries to stand for, and she said that she feels a lot of people voted for her not because of her as an actress, but for the role that she played as Belle. And that is also deserving for Emma Watson to win for that, because she fought so hard to turn Belle into such a strong example, a role model for modern women, which I think is so nice. And to, really speak to not fitting in and, women being ahead of their time and struggling in older societies. I thought that was all great. And, of course, Bill Condon, I'm sure wanted to do that as well. But don't forget that Emma Watson insisted that, Stephen Chbosky come in and be one of the screenwriters on the project. She really pushed a lot to make Beauty and the Beast what it is, and I'm so happy to see her rewarded for that. So I think it's fabulous, and I think it's really amazing. I think the reaction to going gender neutral is, well, the women just won't be able to compete, and the fact that they won both categories is really nice. Now, again, I think it might be because the MTV audience skews female, but still, MTV's a big brand name, and it was very big on social media, and it's a big win all around. So I think that's lovely. All right, so that's the first story of the day. I'm curious, did you watch the MTV Movie Awards? They debuted a lot of clips, so you might have tuned in. If so, what did you think of the show, and what did you think of all the women who won? And to be fair, Beauty and the Beast and Stranger Things are both huge phenomenons, and those two female performers are at the center of those tornadoes. All right, so the second story of the day, speaking of women in movies, is about the Edge of Tomorrow sequel, which is getting a little bit of coverage because Doug Liman, the director of Edge of Tomorrow, is currently doing publicity for Amazon's The Wall. That small movie that he made is a really quick thing. It stars John Cena and Aaron Taylor Johnson. Amazon, it's an Amazon original. But of course, as I've mentioned to you before, when you're doing publicity for a movie like that, and you know that no one's really going to be searching for The Wall, you try and layer in movies that people would be interested in. And of course, people are interested in the Edge of Tomorrow sequel. So he's getting asked a lot about that. And because he wants people to click on his interviews, he's answering the questions. So he talked about the fact that Edge of Tomorrow 2 is coming together. But it still has title problems. And he says, right now it's called Live, Die, Repeat, and Repeat, which is the worst title ever. It's too long. And you might recall that the first movie had really big title problems. It was called, the original manga is called All You Need Is Kill. And then they decided to call it, I think it was Live, Die, and Repeat, like momentarily, and then they went with Edge of Tomorrow, which is just so studio executive bland. And then they were like, this is not going well. So you might recall that Live, Die, Repeat became the subtitle for the movie, and then it became bigger and bigger in font size on the poster, and Edge of Tomorrow became smaller and smaller to the point that it was just called Live, Die, Repeat. I think that Live, Die, Repeat, and Repeat is a very bad title. We'll see. I mean, it's too long for the marquee. It's too long for the poster. It's too hard to say. It's going to take up too much metadata in search. It's not a very optimized title. But then the other interesting thing is that, we have a whole whitewashing controversy now. It's taken down movies left and right. Ghost in the Shell, of course, the latest casualty. But All You Need Is Kill never suffered from that, which is interesting. I guess because it's a smaller manga. It's not like Ghost in the Shell, which is like iconic when it comes to anime and manga. All You Need Is Kill has an audience, but it's a much smaller property. So nobody really made a big deal about it. But I'd be interested to see if that would rear its ugly head again. I think that a lot of people liked Edge of Tomorrow. If you didn't see Edge of Tomorrow, it's actually a pretty darn good movie. I would watch it if I were you. It's excellent. And so I would just cast an Asian actor in a very large role. Not like Ghost in the Shell, which just did lip service to diversity, unfortunately. I would cast an Asian actor in a very large role, like the main supporting role after Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, to kind of like fend that off, okay? But anyway, speaking of the stars, Tom Cruise, of course, is returning, but Emily Blunt is as well. Doug Liman confirmed that, and that's wonderful. She was so good in that part. She was so good, in fact, that so many people, like myself and many of you, were like, she should be Captain Marvel. It didn't happen. She got Mary Poppins, though, which is pretty awesome, although I think she largely got that off of Into the Woods. She's going to make a great Mary Poppins. But anyway, although I do think that Emily Blunt continues to be a box office, well, we won't call her poison. Let's call her a liability. A real wild card, and more often than not, a negative card. So I'm curious to see how Mary Poppins does. Into the Woods didn't do that well in terms of box office. But Edge of Tomorrow, it was a slow burn, but it ended up doing quite well. And hopefully the sequel, Doug Liman's a fabulous director. So I hope that the sequel will do even better. And I'm really glad to see Emily Blunt staying in the action arena. She's got to stay in there, along with Charlize Theron, who did so well as Furiosa, another choice that we had for Captain Marvel. And of course, she's coming back with Atomic Blonde. And then you have Wonder Woman coming up. So I'm really glad that Emily Blunt is staying in that arena, and I hope that she continues to impress. And I hope that her role is maybe even beefed up a little bit more in terms of action. So that's the second story of the day. Now, the third story of the day is Brad Pitt's comeback, and we've been talking a lot about his acting comeback, but also his business plan B continues to grow. So Brad Pitt, you might have noticed, is doing a lot of publicity all of a sudden. He's emerging from his hiding place after his horrible and very ugly divorce with Angelina Jolie. He's been talking, their marriage was born in the press. They had an affair on Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a Doug Liman movie, by the way, which totally helped that movie. And it was like, it was a big scandal, they might make a feud about it someday, Jennifer Aniston and Angelina Jolie, let's say. And Brad Pitt was, I think, he knew what he was doing. But anyway, so Brad Pitt, he's actually come out of all this stuff pretty darn good. I think, 'cause, I think he just keeps his head down and focuses on his work for the most part. And I think it was somewhat sympathetic that Brad Pitt really wanted to have a family and Jennifer Aniston did not. And I think that they just grew apart. I think the way he did it was pretty bad, but everything ended up okay for all parties involved. So anyway, he's finally emerging from his hiding because he has to promote War Machine. That's why he's doing all this publicity. He's just recently was on the cover of GQ, I believe, ripping off a Harry Styles photo shoot, which was kind of odd. I can't believe his publicity team didn't catch that. I don't know why they would let that happen to him. But anyway, so he's promoting War Machine, and also, of course, World War Z 2 is moving forward again with David Fincher. Looks like he's going to sign on, and Paramount greenlighting that sequel. But in addition to his acting work, Plan B signed that deal with Megan Allison's Annapurna Pictures, which of course is now a distributor as well as a production company. And in fact, Plan B is very much the production company that Megan Allison tried to build with Annapurna. She has a huge checkbook from her dad, who owns Oracle. And so actually her brother David Allison does Skydance. And he actually, come to think of it, Skydance is the financial backer for World War Z. So Brad Pitt knows the Allison family quite well. So he's making big commercial blockbusters with her brother David, and now he and Megan are going to make art house pictures. And Megan Allison came to Hollywood with a huge checkbook. She made friends with all the big name talent in the artistic circles, and said, "Hey, I'll let you do whatever you want, and you can spend as much money as you want." And of course, everyone came over to her. But I think that she gave them too much freedom, and the results have been not so great. For instance, I think she kind of killed Paul Thomas Anderson's career. When he was working with Scott Rudin, he was doing really well, like There Will Be Blood, but both The Master and Inherent Vice, I think, were too self-indulgent, and nobody talks about Paul Thomas Anderson anymore. So sometimes producers exist for a reason. They're supposed to rein you in and keep you on track, and Megan Allison, I don't believe, does that. So anyway, as for Pitt, though, he seems to be taking over for Harvey Weinstein as the new golden boy of the Oscars. And he even has an Oscar. His one Oscar is for producing, of course, for 12 Years a Slave. And also gets another one now, I believe, for Moonlight, which was also from him. So he's getting a lot more self-confidence, and now he and his Plan B production team want to do this, for instance, this Dick Cheney movie with Adam Kay as the follow-up to The Big Short, which was also produced by Brad Pitt and his company. But Paramount blinked at the $50 million budget for a Dick Cheney movie. They're like, with starring Christian Bale. They're like, I'm not paying for that. And I can see where they're coming from. But again, Megan Allison has a huge checkbook and never says no. So Brad Pitt has moved Plan B to Annapurna as a distributor. And I think Megan Allison will use Plan B to bulk up her producing credits. She'll probably take an executive producer credit on all their pictures as a result of this. And the deal, it's just for 3 years. We'll see how it goes. It's a 3-year deal with 3 pictures a year. That's a lot. That's huge output for Plan B. Although they're doing a lot now. The Lost City of Z is theirs as well, and that also has some buzz. Yeah, who would have thought that Brad Pitt would become such a fantastic producer? Good for him. But anyway, 3 films for 3 years, and Annapurna will handle marketing and distribution, and also awards campaigns. Although I think the Plan B at this point probably has a pretty good, awards Rolodex after 12 Years a Slave and Moonlight, etc. I'm sure that they can handle their own awards campaigns to some degree. So we'll see how Annapurna does. I think that Detroit from Catherine Bigelow, their first movie that they'll be distributing, has not been handled so well so far. Hopefully that will change. But I don't have a lot of faith in Annapurna, but I hope that the Plan B pictures are just that strong. I have faith in Plan B. So, who's using who here, right? I think that Plan B could maybe eventually take over. Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if someday they merge into one company. That sounds like probably where they might be headed with this. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day, and I have an absolutely fabulous and hilarious viewer question from Hugo Patino Cano. So Hugo, I just love the frankness of this. Hugo goes, "Yeah, I have a question. Why does Max Landis keep getting work if his last few movies have been box office bombs?" Hilarious. I love the directness, and this is a really great topic because Max Landis is a very unique situation, and I think he's a good example of the Hollywood machine. All right, so he has a track record. It might be spotty, Hugo, but it has some real wins in it. So Power Rangers, I think, did better than anyone would have thought. Victor Frankenstein was a mess, but American Ultra has very good moments, and it was very clever. And then Chronicle, of course, I think he's still writing Chronicle to some degree. Also, his American Alien comic book that he wrote for DC about Superman was quite good. I mean, his agent just has to send that around and be like, you can see Max is talented. Also, he did the Dirk Gently TV series recently, but then also he has the Bright deal. Now, that's the deal that he made with Netflix. It's the most expensive movie that Netflix has ever made, directed by David Ayer and starring Will Smith and Joel Edgerton and Noomi Rapace. And Max Landis wrote that. He got a huge payday for writing that screenplay. And so that is, I'm sure that he's getting a lot of momentum out of that right now, because that's a landmark deal. And he was very much at the center of that. And he lucked out because, as we all know, David Ayer is not really big on, like, my scripts have to be good. So I think he's more of a high concept guy, and so he went with this, and so that's very big for right now. If I were Max Landis' agent, I'd be saying he's the guy who did Chronicle and that Netflix Bright deal, and I think people would be all over that. And for some reason, they forget about the Victor Frankenstein. But I have to also say that Max Landis is very big on social media, and he's done a very good job painting his work as misunderstood or tampered with, right? Being like, I don't think he really does a good job of making you think, well, maybe the Victor Frankenstein script was great and they just messed around with it once they got it on set, right? It's not Max Landis' fault. He's done a very good job with that. He's also a name screenwriter, so he generates chatter. Max Landis can make headlines himself, and that's valuable to a studio. His Twitter, his social media footprint is strong, so they're going to like that as well. You know, they can put him in the publicity, and people are reluctant to spend money, on the chances they might get a bad movie. So the more names and, accomplishments you can throw up there to make them feel a little bit better about, security, about this is going to be at least watchable, the better. And Max Landis, I think there's stuff to throw up there that makes the movie look good. But then here's the big one, and why he was successful, I think, in the first place, and that's his parentage. Max Landis is John Landis' son. John Landis is a huge director, a comedy director. Not so much today, but he was back in the day. Now, he did a movie, of course, he also has a horrible controversy to his name, the Twilight Zone film, where a sequence that he was directing ended up having several people, including some children, decapitated by a helicopter blade that came loose. Like, you think what happened to Dylan O'Brien on The Maze Runner was bad. At least he survived and has continued with his career. But anyway, after that, John Landis did, Twilight Zone fell in the middle of these movies. But John Landis, just to give you an idea of how big a name he is, he directed Animal House, he directed Trading Places, he directed Three Amigos, he directed Coming to America. His career kind of fell off after that. And also he worked with Michael Jackson extensively. He directed, for instance, the Thriller music video. So he's a really big name. And you never lose those kind of connections that you forge while you have that kind of a career. So John Landis can pick up the phone and get people to at least give Max's stuff a look when he was starting out. But then also, here's the other thing. John Landis has a very iconic film, An American Werewolf in London. And that's really, that's his signature thing that he's accomplished, I think. And it's so big that he's now taking that card, which he wrote and directed that movie, and he's passing it on to his son. And Max Landis is currently it's being slated to remake that movie. I think he's actually going to direct it too. I think it's going to be his directorial debut, if I'm not mistaken. So Max Landis, I think, to be fair, has earned a lot of his own success. But make no mistake, it is very much built on his father's success, and his father is still pushing him forward. Because it's, once you get a foot in the door in Hollywood, you want to keep your family in the business. So John Landis, of course, wants his son to succeed, and they want to set it up so that Max Landis' children could work in Hollywood and continue. So it's very much the way things are done. So that's why Max Landis continues to get work. All right, but you can't get work forever. John Landis doesn't really work anymore. But again, he still has the connections. He can still pick up the phone. So anyway, that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below, I think, today's top 3 stories, Hugo's viewer question about Max Landis, any questions that you might have, and of course, any stories you might like to see covered here on Morning Movie News. Thanks for watching. Bye.